Welcome, I'm Yvonne and here's what happened this week. China says a group of sea agencies conducted humanitarian and maritime security patrols around Taiwan's Kinmen Islands. While some Taiwanese fishermen in the area welcome the increased security, law enforcement agencies are wary of China's presence. Hamilton reports.
Chinese fishing vessels operating around Taiwan's outlying islands of Kinmen. These incursions are becoming more common, with Taiwan's Coast Guard reporting that it drove away 9 Chinese fishing boats this week alone. Taiwan's Coast Guard says it continues to enforce the law around the country's waters.
就是常态性的执法，我们都依执法的 SOP 在进行哈。应该要驱离的会驱离，应该要登检的或者是扣留的，我们都依法行政。
The recent increase in Chinese vessels began after the death of 2 Chinese fishers in February, whose vessel was chased by Taiwan's Coast Guard near Kinmen. That incident prompted China to increase its patrols to ensure the safety of its own citizens, as these waters are often choppy but are essential for fishing. Several Chinese fishing and maritime agencies are now conducting joint humanitarian patrols to ensure maritime safety. Officials and locals in Kinmen say that more ships should be welcomed as they could help with rescue efforts if needed.
救难这个事情是无国界的，应该是会赞同这一个想法。一味的立场是乐观其成。
我们这边的民众有发生什么状况，或者呢对岸乡亲有发生一些出海发生状况，基本上我觉得在人道救援的角度来讲，都是一个很好的方法。
But Taiwan's Coast Guard and law enforcement agencies are wary of China's hidden presence. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has threatened to use military force to bring the country under its control. Chinese warplanes already fly around Taiwan on a daily basis, and analysts are concerned that upped patrols could become a new normal.
But the reality is, China likes to assert its control over an area normally by conducting law enforcement operations there. Look at the South China Sea. That's what they claim to be doing when they go toe-to-toe with the Philippines, a couple times a month.
This form of coercion, sometimes called gray zone warfare, is putting a strain on Taiwan's already limited resources because the country needs to respond to every incursion. And so the question now is what Taiwan can do as it's faced with pressure on both the military and now law enforcement around its outlying islands.
The combination of pressures on Taiwan from China, it's like death by a thousand cuts, right? It's everyday military aircraft, every day a presence around Kinmen, balloons now frequently. I think that what Taiwan needs to do is focus on investing in low-cost capabilities that they can use to monitor these activities. And then that gives them more flexibility to respond as a situation develops.
As Taiwan tries to manage the increasing range of threats, it'll have to make sure it can do so, both without escalating the situation and expending its resources. John Su and Hamilton for TaiwanPlus.
The fatal food poisoning case that shocked Taiwan this week has a new legal twist. The restaurant involved isn't insured. As investigators dig for clues as to what went wrong, there are new questions about who will pay compensation. John Van Trieste has this update.
Businessman Li Fangxuan stays silent as he arrives at a meeting over his scandal-hit restaurant chain, Bolam Kopitiam. 2 people have died and over a dozen have fallen ill after eating at a popular branch in a Taipei shopping mall. One autopsy has found a fatal toxin that can grow naturally on certain foods that aren't properly stored. But officials say they still aren't ruling out foul play. While investigators try to figure out what went wrong, the reporters here have new questions. Chief among them, who's going to compensate victims and their families? It turns out the restaurant chain stopped paying its insurance as it struggled with debts. Even officials still don't know the answer, but it could fall to the shopping mall or the food court the restaurant was in.
所以如果这一次的事件可以落在远东跟大时代的公共意外责任险里面的范围内，那我就相信对于受难者家属会放下心中的大石。
The city has asked this insurer to explain within 2 days whether the restaurant falls under its coverage. The restaurant chain's legal troubles don't end there, though. It was supposed to shut down all its Taipei branches, but it kept a restaurant it runs under a different name open.
今天早上的时候，我们发现它漏登了一间，开罚多少钱？我们会再做一个综合的评估。那根据食安法，最高是300万。
And even that's not the end of Polam Kopitiam's troubles. Taipei's Legal Affairs Committee says it will help victims' families file to confiscate the restaurant's assets, meaning insured or not, it will face financial penalties. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's opposition Kuomintang has proposed amendments to the country's nuclear energy law, which would extend the lifespan of a nuclear power plant. But the prospect of continuing to use atomic energy doesn't sit well with some people. Leslie Liao has more.
Civic groups gather outside of the opposition Kuomintang's branch office in Kaohsiung, southern Taiwan. They're protesting the party's proposed amendments to Taiwan's nuclear energy law. Nuclear power has long been a divisive issue in Taiwan. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, has committed to abolishing atomic energy, calling it unsafe and pointing to the complicated problem of dealing with radioactive waste. However, Taiwan's President-elect Lai Ching-te, also from the DPP, says he would consider extending nuclear power use if it can be guaranteed safe. That's a practical response to the ongoing energy shortages that Taiwan faces. The opposition supports using nuclear energy to make up the shortfall and bridge the gap until renewables can scale up. Kuomintang legislators want to extend the lifespan of the Ma'anshan nuclear power plant on Taiwan's southern coast, which is scheduled to be decommissioned next year. Protesters say an extension would be irresponsible. They say the Ma'anshan plant is surrounded by active fault lines, and the potential for earthquakes makes it too risky to run. The protesters say the Kuomintang should look to alternative power sources.
国民党其实应该好好把心思放在能源的转型上面，放在智慧电网上面，因为这样子才是对台湾长治久安的。
Protesters also say Taiwan doesn't have a proper plan to handle nuclear waste. They say extending the plant's lifespan without a safe way to dispose of waste is just kicking a toxic can down the road.
核废料的问题到现在都还没有办法解决。如果继续延役的话，其实我们会制造更多的核废料，去把这些问题丢给下一代。我们认为这是一个不负责任的能源使用的行为。
Atomic energy is a small source of power for Taiwan, making up less than 10% of the total energy mix. Despite its small size, its impact on society is large, splintering the public like the fault lines beneath the Ma'anshan nuclear plant. But these are battle lines drawn in a literal struggle for power. Patrick Sun and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's environmental groups are celebrating as a years-long legal battle against a planned gas terminal could now turn in their favor. Sadie Jensen has more.
This is one of Taiwan's oldest and most abundant reefs. Spanning almost 30 kilometers of the country's northern coastline, for the last few years it's been neighbors with a controversial energy project that is threatening its survival. But now environmentalists are seeing a win as the country's highest court reopens an old case to protect the reef.
我个人是真的是非常的感慨哈。那今天呢，最高行政法院呢，还我们公道，还了全国关心环境朋友的公道。
Their efforts to save the reef from this liquid natural gas development were defeated in a popular referendum in 2021, when people voted against relocating the project. They also brought their case to court, which decided to allow the project to continue. But now the Supreme Administrative Court says that decision needs to be reviewed, and the terminal's developer, the state-owned CPC, needs to prove that the project isn't harming the reef if it wants to see it completed.
最高行政法院认为，那如何去证明它是有效的避免或减轻措施？所以我们在这边呼吁，中油要立即停工。
But the CPC says it's making sure the project's environmental impact is minimal, and they'll continue with the terminal's construction.
中油公司皆遵照相关法规办理许可申请，并获同意。 3阶的工程我们持续进行中，并没有停工。
As construction continues, the case against this gas project is being reviewed further. A glimmer of hope for environmentalists in a small country where the need for energy seems to constantly compete with protecting biodiversity. Patrick Chen and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Cannabis busts are on the rise in Taiwan, even as regional neighbors such as Thailand are decriminalizing the plant. But as Chris Gorin explains, Taiwan's government is no fan of legalization.
Long-standing restrictions on cannabis are being eased in many countries around the world, with some having decriminalized or even legalized its possession and sale. Taiwan is not one of those countries. But its use in the country may be on the rise. According to the Justice Ministry's Investigation Bureau, over the last decade, the amount of cannabis seized by law enforcement has increased by nearly 20-fold.
本来大麻是在5名之后，目前已经上升到第4名，所以确实吸食大麻确实有上升的趋势。
Authorities have also recently charged a host of high-profile celebrities with possessing cannabis, usually in very small quantities. Just this month, the influencer Flora bowed before media and begged for forgiveness after being charged with cannabis possession.
我会好好去面对我的错误，然后也希望我未来的身心状况可以越来越健康，不要再去依赖这些不好的东西。真的很抱歉。
Punishment for cannabis use in Taiwan extends even beyond its own borders. Thailand became the first Asian country to decriminalize recreational cannabis in 2022, and many Taiwanese influencers have since posted videos of themselves using it there. But videos on cannabis shot outside Taiwan may still be illegal in the country. The Justice Ministry last summer released a statement reminding people that, quote, seducing the public to use cannabis by teaching them how to use it or spreading what they call rumors about its harmlessness is a crime which carries a sentence of up to 7 years in prison. The ministry has repeatedly made it clear that there is no consideration of cannabis legalization in Taiwan.
虽然有些团体主张也能够比照外国娱乐用的合法化，但是呢，它确实是危害人体健康很严重，所以并没有开放的这样的一个政策。
Cannabis use may be rising in popularity, but with heavy criminal penalties and barely a whiff of political will, it seems cannabis decriminalization in Taiwan remains a pipe dream. Kama Xu and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Now be thankful you cannot smell this next story, as over 1,000 dead fish are floating in a river in Taichung. Once again, Sally Jensen reports.
Picking through heaps of dead, bloated fish, floating on a river in western Taiwan. More than 1,500 tilapia festering under the blazing sun. Residents are now protesting. The Environmental Protection Bureau told them the fish died from lack of oxygen, but it turns out they were actually killed by industrial wastewater. The local government says it won't shirk its share of responsibility for the environmental disaster.
其实针对上游的排放，这一些污染的排放还是有疑虑。那我想，这个台中市政府也责无旁贷吼，那我们就立刻成立这个专案小组。 那会跟经发局来合作，那进行专案的一个稽查。
A tofu factory is suspected of illegally discharging wastewater, polluting the riverways. It'll be fined anywhere from between $940 and $94,000 US. But researchers believe the government could be doing more.
这种污染排放的定价、碳排的定价，去 帮助台湾做整体的产业结构调整，然后又不愿意改变的企业，就是把它淘汰掉。
Environmental damage from dense industrial activity remains a persistent problem in Taiwan, and this latest scandal may mean polluting factories face bigger calls to avoid raising a fishy stink. Ethan Pan and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Here's What Happened. Finally, remember to always look before you leap. These adrenaline junkies are cliff diving in Saudi Arabia's southwestern Jazan province. I'm Yvonne Young. Take care, and I'll see you next time.